just for Muslim women in tech, we're just hosting it. And so the goal of this is basically just to highlight Muslim women that are making waves in different areas of computing and technology. And we wanted to start with software engineering. We have panels planned with women that are product managers, design, data science. And so we're really excited to be kicking this off and seeing all the interest. And thank you to our panelists today. Just to give a couple of details and updates about how this event is going to go, we have the chat open. So as we're speaking and the panel is going, if there are any questions that you have, feel free to drop them there publicly, or you can message me or Khadija Faris personally, and we can answer the questions. We can ask them anonymously. We also should be going live on Facebook, hopefully soon. We'll let you know when that happens. Khadija will drop a link in the chat, and feel free to share that with any friends. This is open to anyone. And to get started, wanted to give a brief intro of Muslim Women in Tech. Muslim Women in Tech, MWIT, was established September 2018. And the goal is to build a community of Muslim women that are in computing and technology, not just engineers, but through a variety of different roles. We've done things like host mentorship programs, hosting meetups in different cities. We created a scholarship last year to send one of our members to the Grace Hopper conference, and really opened up a lot of opportunities for people, connections, networking. We started a whole referrals program, so helping each other get jobs. And so we're really excited about what's to come, and we built up a board now, and we're really excited with having so many people working behind the scenes to make this happen, making the flyers and advertising. And this is one of our first public events that we're hosting. So thank you for everyone that's joining in. And before I get started, I'll give a brief intro of myself, and then I'll open it up to the panelists so I'm not talking too much. My name is Neda. I graduated last year from the University of California, San Diego with a master's in computer science, joined Facebook full-time in January as a software engineer. And so I'm hosting this event out of self-interest. I'm really junior engineer, new in my career. I love hearing from role models and people that are, that I identify with. So seeing other Muslim women that are doing amazing things and that are so successful really inspires me. And so I'm really excited to be hearing from all of you. And so to get started, I know each of you can give better intros about yourselves than I could. So if Madiha, you want to get started?
Sure. Hi, my name is Madiha. I am a senior software engineer at Square.
Do you want to go a little bit more, I guess, background?
Sure.
Education? Yeah. That company in that role.
Questions. Of course, sorry. So I grew up in California, went to school at UC Berkeley, graduated in 2015 with a degree in electrical engineering and computer science, and then spent about a year and change at Google, spent 3 years at Nextdoor, both software engineering positions, and I recently joined Square about 3 months ago. So I'm doing full stack web development. The way I describe it to folks is everything from store this number in the database to show it on the screen in a green font.
Nice. Cool. Fatima, would you like to go?
Sure, I can go next. My name is Fatima Oz. I am, well, I guess I'll tell you where I come from. I was born in Bosnia. I left the country last year of the war in 1995, came to United States, completed my undergraduate degree in computer science at New York University, did my master's degree in software engineering at Brandeis Universities back in Massachusetts. Have been in engineering field for last 20 years. I'm currently a principal engineer at Qualcomm, have been working for Qualcomm for last 15 years, leading a team. I'm a product owner. Basically, I'm the voice of the stakeholders. And I guess I'll tell you more later.
Thank you, Fatima.
Sure.
Namna?
Yes, I can go next. So I'm an engineering manager at Facebook. Going back, I grew up in Pakistan. That's where I did all my education. I did my bachelor's at FAST Karachi, if anybody knows about the Karachi universities. After I graduated, I was working for a software company back in Pakistan, and on a whim, I applied to Microsoft. I learned from one of my, batchmates that Microsoft was hiring internationally, so I applied and I actually got an offer. So then I made the decision to move to the other end of the world, literally, in Redmond, Washington, to work for Microsoft. So my career path is pretty traditional. Like I stayed in the software engineering IC path for the first 12, 13 years of my career. And I really wanted to try out people management at some point, and an opportunity came up in 2017 and I jumped on it. I started at Electronic Arts as an engineering manager, and spent 2.5 years there, and now I'm at Facebook.
Welcome. I know we kind of both joined Facebook around the same time. Yeah. So I have a set of questions that I wanted to kind of start us off on. We really want to keep this as a conversation, kind of piggyback off of some points that you make. If there's anything that we think we can go a little bit deeper in, whatever you're comfortable sharing, of course. And if there are any specific topics that people want to hear more about in the chat, feel free to leave a message or message me personally. And so I wanted to get started off through all of your careers in engineering, software engineering management. Obviously there's ups and downs, there's hurdles, and we wanted to start on a positive note. And so I wanted to kind of ask, what are some of the biggest wins you think you've had in your career? What are those opportunities that you think you've gotten where you've really excelled? And were those opportunities that came from really learning how to self-advocate, were from opportunities where people really believed in you, and that's where you got to that place and to that role? Just to really hear from each of you. If Madiha, you'd like to get started.
Sure. One of the biggest wins, I would say, so I was working at Nextdoor prior to my current position, and we launched a feature called the Kindness Reminder, which does basically exactly what it sounds like. It's a reminder that pops up when folks are commenting, and it's a reminder to be kind. That actually started as a hackathon project, and just watching that project go from something that we had as a hackathon project and watching it actually survive a change in CEO that we had at the company, which often comes with a change in a lot of executives and leadership. And now it's something that has been launched globally. There's now a whole pillar around community health and vitality and all of that good stuff. And so that was a really interesting experience and a really interesting win to see something go from just an idea to actually launched in production.
Yeah, maybe I can talk about an example as well. I won't go too much into the details of what the idea was, but some of the things I learned while, when I look back at the big wins in my career is really the value in taking risks, because that's really where the biggest, juiciest projects are. And they're not always obvious that, they're going to be super successful. Most of the times people are also shying away from them a little bit, that this is not an area I jump into. It could be a can of worms, but if if you have a strength in an area and you feel passionately about it, then just going for it and taking the risk definitely pays off, in my experience.
And I guess I can basically point out that every time I was given an opportunity to establish a culture that promotes quality and engages every single member to deliver at the highest level of their performance, was a big win in my career. Throughout my career, I have been given an opportunity to lead multiple teams, and seeing people empowered and deliver their job is, in my book, the great win. Going back to your questions about advocating, when it comes to really championing for the interest of those whom we love and care for, I think women are really at the front lines. But when it comes to self-advocacy, we really often come up short. It's just not in our nature to, generally speaking, to come forward and talk about our strengths and talents. But I would really advise all the ladies to treat the self-advocacy as a muscle. Build a training plan and feel comfortable to stand in front of a mirror and practice, right? What you will say in a situation when you will have to be your own self-advocate. So that would be my advice. And over the years, I can tell you, I used to be very shy. Very recently, I took a strengths assessment test. I got all these 5 strengths identified. I took that as is and sent it directly to my manager. Years ago, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. But yeah, over time, one learns.
Yeah. It's one of those like fake it till you make it things. Where
Yeah.
you just to flex that muscle until you get comfortable. And then related to what you said is it's so like within women communities, so within MWIT, for example, people are so quick to support each other, but then it's always difficult to apply the same sort of thing to yourself. And yeah, I wanted to also ask Namra, when you brought up the point about taking risks, how do you kind of evaluate what would be a calculated risk and what may be kind of out of scope of what you are actually capable of doing, especially when you are really early in your career and it's like, this sounds like a real challenge for me, but I still can't really judge my ability and know if this is like a reasonable challenge for me to take on, or kind of how do you evaluate those factors?
Yeah, I think you have to really think about, at what point you are in your career and if you are comfortable with taking a risk. Like sometimes when you're just starting out, there is already so much to learn that you're out of your comfort zone anyway. So a lot of the things that you are doing are not as risky, but you are still growing. So it doesn't matter whether you're taking risks or not. Growth is the important part. But there comes a point where sort of you feel like your growth might be slowing down and you might need to put yourself in places where you might not be very comfortable. So to assess the risk, like you wouldn't be able to get to like 100% confidence that something will be successful. But assessing the value that the thing adds to the company or the business or the team, whatever the context might be. And if that, just talking to this different stakeholders who are involved and figuring out if that is something that they care about, if that is something, if when you talk about it, does it like make their eyes go wide and make people excited? And in those cases, sometimes even like if the things are not going your way, like people will jump on and help you. So if you have the passion to take something forward, I would say go for it, and the stars do align. Do your research in terms of, if you have the right skill set, if there is a skill gap in you or in the team, you might partner with somebody that might have that, right? So it's always better to work in a team than try to solve the problem by yourself. So build that, if you feel like it's not something that you can do on your own, you build that support system around you, get people on board with you, and then you move forward.
Yeah, and I'd just add to that, part of what you said too is calculating the reward that comes with that risk, right? So it's not necessarily always the case that you have to take the biggest risk right away. So there might be some risk associated with spending a little bit of your time learning some new technology, but the potential reward is that you become the expert on the team who knows how to use this technology that the team wants to be using. And so you can kind of use that level of calculus to decide what risks you want to take at which stages in your career.
No, I love that. Fatima, is there anything you wanted to add?
I'm always, taking opportunities that come my way. My recommendation would be, no matter what the risk is, plunge into it, and over time one learns, right, that there could be circumstances where we fail, but I think even at the end we end up learning something. There is, I take it as an experience. It's a journey through which we learn something, whether it ends up being a success or a failure. So I don't know, throughout my career, as the things were coming my way, I guess it's just me. I would just say yes, yes, yes to everything.
Yeah.
Without thinking too much about the risk.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes there are like those longer term wins that may, like you said, lead to some losses or some smaller failures along the way. And so related to that, if let's say there was a risk that you took, or you're in a situation where maybe you're not performing as your manager expects, or maybe you're not delivering what you were supposed to deliver, how did you manage, I guess, those conversations, better understanding the expectations that they have from you?
Yeah. That kind of falls for me under this larger umbrella of career management and feedback management, which is, as Fatima said, it's a muscle that is important, but isn't one that we are learn that much about in school. And so for me, there are like a few different tools that you can use when it comes to expectations. We're pretty blessed in the engineering roles that the expectations are often just like written in a spreadsheet somewhere. And so something I've done in the past with my manager is say, hey, you frame it as a growth conversation. Hey, I'm really looking to understand how I can grow. I'd love to sit down with you for a little bit, go through the levels doc and get a sense of how I'm doing, what my biggest areas for growth can be. And if you feel like you're doing well, you can actually start with the level above yours, right? So if you're level 1, you can say, let's talk about level 2. I'd love to hear from you, where you feel my biggest strengths are in this area. Here's what I think my strengths are. What do you think are most important for me to work on? And the nice thing about starting that way is if you find that you're doing a lot of things in the level 2, then it can turn into a promotion conversation. What do I need to do then for us to put a promo packet in? Or if you find that there's not that much you're doing at level 2, you can roll it down and say, okay, what about the level that I'm at now? What am I nailing? What am I not nailing? And you can kind of adjust expectations that way. And then the other thing I would say is there's a performance evaluation that happens at your company with your boss. And then there's another performance evaluation, which is called when you look for another job or when you talk to a recruiter or something like that. So if you're having career conversations with your manager and you feel like, you're having that conversation 2 or 3 times and you feel like the goalposts are moving, month 1, your manager says, this is what you need to work on. And month 2, it changes to something else, but it doesn't seem like you're actually, you're on a treadmill, you're not actually advancing your career. Then you can say, all right, maybe it's time I talk to a friend who works at another company or a recruiter and get a second kind of signal. Are both of these performance evaluations telling me the same thing? Do I need to do more work to advance? Or is there something going on where, one signal is telling me no, and there's another signal telling me yes? In which case, then you can think about, okay, am I still growing on my team? Are there things that, would the work that I want to do or where I want to go be better suited for somewhere else? So having those really granular conversations allows you to get feedback very quickly and then make well-informed risks, as we talked about before.
Yeah. And it's different per company. I think we had this conversation earlier where I know at Facebook you have to demonstrate working at some level for at least 6 months before you can get promoted, versus interviewing elsewhere. Sometimes given your performance in the interview, if they think that you can work at that next level, then they will hire you for that. So I think it just depends what process you're going through to get promoted and to get to that level.
But I would like to add something. Looking back, I think I wish I have sought for feedback more often. And I would really encourage, especially junior engineers, people who are entering this field, don't wait for these annual or, every 6 months reviews that happen to receive feedback and course correct, right? Be constantly on the lookout for ways to receive the feedback, because of the learning opportunities that they offer. I think we should really perceive feedback as a welcome opportunity, not really as a dreaded obligation. Think of it as taking a test, right? You're studying so hard, right, to take that exam, and then you don't get any grade. You definitely want to get the grade, and you want to get that grade sooner so that you can figure out how do I proceed, right? Like in my case, honestly, every 2 weeks I would reach out to team and say, okay, guys, do you have any feedback? Anything I can do better? Put it on the table. I know it's you make yourself vulnerable. One has to have courage to ask for that, but I think it's very important to get the feedback.
Definitely. And there's a philosophy that performance review season should never be a surprise, right? Like Fatma said, if you're giving a presentation, you don't want to wait 6 months for someone to tell you, hey, that presentation wasn't very engaging. Like, that's not useful. And so you want to be in this situation. It's both something that good managers are able to do, is give you feedback regularly. And as Fatma said, it's also something you can seek out. So asking really specific questions to make it easier for them to come up with something, right? Hey, I just gave this presentation. I would love to hear, what's something that went really well? And was there anything I could do differently next time? Give them the opportunity to say something nice, and then couch the opportunity for them to share with you something that maybe they were thinking during the presentation, but they wouldn't have been comfortable saying to you.
Yep.
And as we're talking about feedback, I feel like it's a really important topic. And as you level up, it becomes more and more important. And one critical thing I learned, which is probably I learned too late, is your peers are probably become a much more important feedback channel for you than your manager. So building that relationship, and it goes both ways. The richer the feedback you give, the richer you get back. So really building that muscle of giving feedback to your peers on how they can do better. They will feel comfortable to share feedback with you on how you can do better. And I feel that's really important for growing and leveling up.
Right. And just to add to that, I really think that one needs to appreciate the fact, that other people took time, effort, and personal risk to provide you feedback. So even if you don't agree with it, so be grateful for that, even if you disagree.
Yeah. Yeah, I've learned that I think the most valuable feedback that I've been getting is from my tech lead, so not my manager at this point, because I'm still learning a lot. They're the ones that are most familiar with my code and the way that I'm working on the project specifically, and kind of learning how to ask for feedback. In the beginning, it seems when you just ask, oh, how am I doing? You'll expect one of two responses. Typically, it's just, oh, you're doing well, but you really kind of need to dig deeper. And as you get familiar with your strengths, it's like, okay, I know I'm doing this well, but I also know that I was struggling in something else before.
Yeah, and I think it is also a little bit of a gender difference here. I think guys are much better at giving each other feedback, like, dude, you messed up there, right? Women are not as vocal about feedback with each other. So I think that's, in general, a muscle we should develop. And we need to basically feel like we are on the same level of playing field as everybody else.
Yeah, there are also studies to suggest that everyone struggles with giving women feedback. So, they've done studies with men where men are more comfortable giving men feedback. And when it comes to giving a woman on their team feedback, it's like, you did fine. So definitely, as everyone said, just building that muscle of asking is the only way that I know how to try and counteract that and get the feedback that, as everyone said, it helps you grow a lot.
Very true. So to segue into another question that I think a lot of people have asked before too, it's as you become more senior in your career, you figure out what your skills and your strengths are, and there becomes that point where you have two different paths you can choose. Either you can continue down the tech IC route as an individual contributor, or people management. And so I wanted to get an idea of what went into making that decision for each of you. For Fatima and for Nama specifically too, since both of you are a little bit more senior in your career, and I know Madiha's probably considering some of these things too, because I would love to hear it. Like personally, I'm already thinking about these things and just seeing kind of how my engineering manager does, like what he does day to day, what my tech lead does day to day, and seeing what type of work I think I can imagine myself doing. Yeah.
Fatima, you want to go first?
Go ahead. You go ahead. I'll go after you.
Okay. So for me, it was something I actually was not super confident that I wanted to do when I was thinking about this decision. Um, at the time, I was playing a tech lead role. So when you're a tech lead, there is a part of people mentorship and development that comes with it. So what I started to realize is I do enjoy the part of growing people and helping people reach their potential. Um, I had at the time there were two contractors on the team, and that was the team that I was sort of the tech lead for. And for people familiar with the tech industry, the for contractors, there's not really any expectation that you will invest in their career growth. But I sort of started pretending like I'm their manager and started having this career growth conversations with them, and really like thinking about how the next step for them was to become full-time at the company. And I helped both of them do that, and I realized how the sense of achievement I felt with that was something I liked. So I decided to pursue that, and that was really, I think, what made the decision for me.
Yeah. And just to get an idea for a timeline, how many years in industry had you been? How many years were you a tech lead before you made that switch?
I think I'd been an IC for 12 years. And I had struggled with that question before too, but I had not decided not to pursue that. And the time I actually decided to go for it, I actually had a mentor who I, reached out for help on this particular question. And the advice he gave me was, like, you have nothing to lose. Like, just go try it out. Just, figure it out for yourself. And 1-2 years is nothing, looking back in the career, in the full arc of your career. So yeah, I took his advice and I tried it out, and so far, it's going well.
Okay, I guess it's my turn. So I was offered a leadership role after about 9.5 years in individual contributor role. It certainly required learning new skill sets. It really, my job became to ensure that my team is successful and that they have what they need to do their job effectively. So while it may be easier for you to sit in some corner, and write a piece of code, right, or solve some technical problem, challenge yourself. Being a manager or leading a team, right, is much more impactful, because you kind of have to make sure that you teach your team skills that they need in order to grow as an engineer, successful engineers. So when I moved into a leadership role, management really no longer carefully assessed my individual accomplishments, but rather the some of the total accomplishments of my team. So there was sort of that shift, right? Now it's like, if your team is performing well, then you're performing well. If they're not doing well, then I'm not doing well. So it really became a shift. And so, but I loved it, and I still love it. I love working with the team and leading them, and of course providing them technical guidance too. So now one important thing that I just want to remind everyone: if you decide to take a leadership role, don't forget to tend to your own garden, and you basically want to have a little garden for yourself where you still continue to practice your individual contributor role. And what do I really mean by that? For instance, right now, I'm leading a team where we are moving all the build infrastructure from on-premise into cloud. And in order for me to really provide appropriate guidance to the team, at the same time, I'm learning about AWS technologies, and I'm trying to get certified in that team as an architect, right? So, but that is something that's kind of, I think it's expected of me to, you know, tend to that garden so that I can successfully contribute to the team. So don't think that just because you're leader, you know, you should not sort of take care of yourself. I think it's very important that you are up to date to the latest technologies, whatever it is that you're working on. So carve out time for yourself. In other words, that's what I'm saying.
Madiha, do you want to share a little bit your perspective on, I guess, whether you see IC or management as something you're interested in?
For myself personally, I think I'm quite interested in trying out a management role at some point. It's definitely very interesting to hear from both of you how long you were in IC roles before you moved into management, because that's something that I've been kind of surveying as I think about what I want to do next. I've noticed a lot of friction in that point between being an IC and Fatima, as you said, the skills are very different. And so I've noticed a lot of friction for folks who are IC, in particular women in my experience, women who are ICs who are trying to find the team or the manager or, you know, working within their own team to get the opportunity to try out management, even for, you know, a little bit. And so it was definitely very helpful to hear from both of you kind of how that transition worked for both of you. It sounds like for both of you, you were working in an IC role and the opportunity kind of was presented to both of you. Is that accurate?
I think in my case, it was actually more intentional. Like this was something, at least I was discussing with my mentor, but my mentor was, you know, not in my team or even in my org at the company. And I had that conversation with my manager when I was at eBay, that, you know, this is something I want to pursue. And like he was pretty honest with me, like in terms of because there is a readiness part of it, and then there is also the team needs to have a, you know, requirement or a need for it. So the need was not really there, and he was pretty, you know, transparent with me on that. So then I, you know, started looking around in my network, and when I got the offer and I was discussing with him, and when I said, okay, I have something to tell you, so the first thing he said was, the only reason you should leave is like, I cannot offer you the I can fix everything else, but I cannot offer that right now to you. So I was like, yeah, that's what I'm getting outside. So I think that was I did you know, sort of intentionally decide on it, and I also tried to sort of make it work in my current team, because obviously that's a much easier transition. If you're already sort of a tech lead and you move into a manager role, it's much less jarring. There's so much to learn. But I went the other route.
Yeah, that's super helpful to know.
Yeah, and even as a tech lead, you're still supporting people just in a different way than from what an engineer would be doing. Yeah, and then going kind of building off of that last point that you gave, Namra, in terms of switching companies. I know Madiha and Namra, you've kind of switched companies, found different roles, positions that you felt like were more aligned with where you wanted to move in. Fatima, you stayed at the same company, and I wanted to ask what kind of motivated you to do that. Did you continuously find challenges there that it felt like a place you could keep growing, versus kind of exploring a different company or a different area?
Right. So I actually, throughout my career, I worked at two companies. One of them is in Massachusetts for about 2.5 years. And my husband received an opportunity here in California. So I ended up moving from East Coast to West Coast and then looking for an opportunity here. And that's when I joined Qualcomm, which was back in 2005. And since then, so for the last 15 years, I have been working for Qualcomm. And I really, when I joined Qualcomm, I joined as an engineer. Prior to that, actually, back in Massachusetts, I was a senior engineer. I worked there for 2.5 years, like I said. And so I did decide to kind of level down and you know, start from ground up, right, as an engineer. at Qualcomm. But while I was at Qualcomm, I was really given an opportunity to explore different roles and responsibilities and migrate between different teams. So even though I had been part of the exact same department since I actually joined the company, I was really blessed with, opportunity to try out different things, So while I was a software engineer, software developer for many years, then I moved to like a scrum master role. Then from there, I moved to product owner role, and I did that for multiple teams, which is what I am today. But I was exposed to different landscapes, and I never really stopped learning new things. And I think that's really what mattered to me. So, over time, I basically was willing to take on new responsibilities and new challenges. So it's never boring.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about my experience, which is probably the other side of the coin. So I think actually in big tech companies, I think we do have that advantage that even switching a team is sort of like switching a company. Like you work with a totally different set of people on, probably a different set of tools and technologies as well. So when I was at Microsoft, I stayed there for a while doing that. Every time I've switched, I feel like it's for a different reason. We already talked about the one with where I wanted to try out management. The first time I switched out of Microsoft was really I wanted to try out more open source world, because at the time Microsoft was pretty contained in the kind of technologies I was exposed to as an engineer. Like it was all Windows, Visual Studio, C#, and there was this whole other innovation going around in the cloud world with all open source technologies. So I wanted to get to work with that. So that was my reason for switching the first time around. Yeah, I think that's the second time it was more around when I was looking for a management role. The third time, when I switched to Facebook, actually I took a sabbatical before that, and that was more like I had a daughter who was less than a year old at the time, and I had a son as well, who was 4 at the time. So I just needed a break, and that's why I took time off. And one thing I feel we are very, very lucky in the tech industry is like there's a lot of opportunities, like in terms of job security. Like it's obviously you feel doubtful when you are leaving a job and you don't have the next thing lined up, that I'm never going to be able to get hired again. But if you look at the data, I've seen people do it in my network, and they were able to do it pretty successfully with like multiple offers. So yeah, that's why I did the last move.
Yeah, I think as Namra said, I have a friend who decided that he needed a break, and he took 4 months off. He just quit his job and went and traveled for 4 months and, did his thing, and then came back and found a job. So we are very blessed in tech that the demand for the skills that we have is so strong right now that it does give us that flexibility, that, switching companies is not seen even as unusual. In certain sizes of companies, it becomes expected. I think the larger the company you go to, as Namra and Fatma said, switching teams becomes the same as feeling like you switched companies, but you get all of the benefits of not actually having changed companies, right? You don't have to change anything about your W-2. You don't have to change, you don't have to interview, all of that stuff. Whereas at smaller companies, the company itself changes over the size of the company. So, where you were when it was 50 people, in terms of process, in terms of expectations, sometimes in terms of who's working there, can change 50, 80, 100% when it reaches 100 people or 150 people or 300 people. And so that can also, you might be surprised to feel that, but at some point you might look around and be like, wait a minute, this isn't actually like the same company as when I joined. You might find that what the company needs right now or the growth opportunities that are available for you aren't aligned with where you actually want to see your career. Or as Namra said, you might want a leadership opportunity, but there might not be space or budget, or your org, the product that you're working on didn't work, and so they're pivoting, and so everything, that side of things is shutting down. And so there are all sorts of reasons where you might feel like, hey, you might get better pay by leaving, you might get a better opportunity by leaving, or the culture might have changed so much that you feel that urge to try something else. The one thing that one of my old coworkers said that really stuck with me, her dad had told her, if you're thinking about making a change, you probably should have made it 6 months ago, because humans really hate change. And that has always stuck with me because it feels emotionally true. Like, I've never actually followed that. And that's how I know that it's probably true. It's like, we really do fear change, but sometimes when you feel that push to try something else, the risk can be pretty low, even having a conversation. And if you're at, a larger company, or you see another team at your company doing something, even opening that conversation to say, hey, I want to challenge myself in that way. Is there some internal transfer that I can do?
Yeah, so I think that the culture part really resonates with me, that it can change very quickly, especially not even in small companies. I think in teams that grow really fast within big companies. And you might not see see yourself doing the new job that you have, but even though you signed up for something else. So it's okay to take a step back and really figure out what resonates with you and go for that.
Definitely.
So switching gears a little bit, I know you touched on it, Namna, when you did kind of take some time off for yourself, and how do you kind of, situations when you feel really overwhelmed, you feel burnt out, with women in particular? I think I was reading an article where women have been hit the hardest women in the workplace have been hit the hardest by COVID, just because of like responsibilities in the household with families. And so work-life balance, one of the questions in the chat was about like work-life balance as you become more senior in your career, and just in general. I know some of you have families too, how you've dealt with that. I know that's a really loaded question. We could probably talk about that for an hour, but however you want to touch upon that.
I think at least so I'm a senior engineer right now, and I currently work at Square, and a lot of these companies, you can look at how leadership phrases things and how leadership values work-life balance, and a lot of that will trickle down. A lot of tech companies right now are doing mental health days off. Some companies will have policies around, we're not going to send emails after certain times. So I've found that in tech, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of pro work-life balance feelings, which help turn things off after work. I don't often have a problem. It ebbs and flows, just like every other thing that you're working on in your life, right? Sometimes you're going to be slammed, you're going to be busy, you're going to be doing a few late nights, and then other times you're going to be like, okay, it's 5 and I have nothing to do, really? It's 5. And so with that ebb and flow, you can fit your self-care things around that. With COVID, I've found that I have to like be more mindful with myself, because the options of fun things that we can do kind of shrinks. So I have to remind myself, like, hey, go for a walk. I know it doesn't sound like a fun thing, but right now that's the most fun thing you can do. So I personally, at my level, have not experienced much difficulty with work-life balance, alhamdulillah. I'm sure as you get into management, it's more difficult, I think, because my responsibilities are just to the computers, and I can tell the computers, most of the time you can tell the computer I'll be back in 3 hours, but with people, you can't always do that.
Yeah, I think the key word here is responsibilities, right? And what you think of as your responsibilities, really look at that and see, are they really just your responsibilities, or should you be sharing them with other people in your life? Like I think a big work-life balance situation comes in with when there are children in the picture, because that itself is more than a full-time job, and anybody who has kids can attest to that. So I think it's really like you have to share that responsibility with your partner and whoever your support system is, because if you really like think of it as, this is my job and there are other people helping me do this job, versus this is a shared responsibility and we are all doing it together. Oftentimes I hear people say things like the man in the family is helping out by taking care of the kids, or helping out by doing the dishes. They're not helping out. It's like nobody says the woman is helping out by doing the dishes, right? So it's really like we need to change that mindset on what is the responsibility and who the responsibility is for, and it's not just for one person.
So maybe I can just add to that a little bit. I wouldn't be telling you truth if I said there is a balance. There is really no balance between work and life, especially now with COVID-19 and all of us working from home. Going back to the earlier point mentioned about sharing responsibilities, I think that is really very important. I would definitely encourage women to share childcare and the housework responsibilities at home. Facebook CEO Sheryl Sandberg, not long ago, she basically pointed out that I think there was a research done that said that women do 2/3 of the housework and 3/4 of the child care, and that's happening today, right? So try to work on changing that at home. And obviously, as pointed out earlier, it does start with sort of defining those responsibilities clearly. And another thing is, if you feel like you're overwhelmed, it's okay to take time off, right, and seek for an extended break. I do know that some companies, including the one that I work for here at Qualcomm, they do provide something called like a returnship program, right? So if you have been out for extended time, and this is male, female, whatever reasons is, you need to take care of your loved one, or you're an army, or whatever it is, children. These companies, are providing these programs where you can actually, gradually get back to work. And I would encourage you to learn about these programs. They last for about 20 weeks, right? And they're just aimed and sort of helping you kind of get back to work right after taking a career break.
Yeah. No, I've referred people to returnship programs. I've loved them. I think it's a really amazing idea for people that have taken time off for whatever reasons to enter the workforce again, because there is that fear where you had to take time off for personal reasons, and it's like, am I gonna have to sacrifice my whole career because of this 6 months or a year in my life? But I think those
Yeah,
are
and they provide mentors too. I actually mentored the lady that joined, I would say probably about 6 months ago. She was out for over a year to take care of her newborn, and then she decided to make use of this returnship program that Qualcomm offers. And they even provide mentors, so people who can help them, check on them, guide them. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic program.
Yeah. If anyone's interested, leave a message in the comments and we can try to link a few opportunities that we know of. We do have one question in the chat, and if anybody has any questions and wants to unmute and share in person, let me know and I can unmute you, or request for you to unmute. I'll read one of the ones from chat right now. Hanan Talib was asking, can you open up how can you open the discussion of feedback with your manager, especially when you're concerned of misunderstanding? That means looking for another team or opportunity. That's a really good point. So when you are interested in kind of leaving your team or the company, how do you bring that up to them without ruining that relationship?
It depends on where you're at and how you frame it. So a lot of tech companies right now will say that they are very open to folks moving around, especially some of the smaller ones, because it's the smart thing to do. Like, if you don't let people move around, they will leave. That's what's going to happen. If they are unhappy and you don't let them switch to another team, they will just switch companies, which is worse. So if you're at a company where folks talk about, hey, we allow folks to move around, we try to make it easy, even though that's not always necessarily emotionally true. I would start by just talking to your manager, like, hey, I'm really interested in these growth opportunities for myself. Kind of start small, start with what's going on your team, start talking about, this is where I see myself, this is what I see myself doing. Is there an opportunity for me to learn some of these skills? Kind of gradually move to that space. Or if you've been on the team for a year or 2 years and there's another team that's just spinning up, and you're like, hey, because that's what makes it easier, right? When you're having a conversation with your manager and you say, hey, we've been talking for the last 6 months about how I'm really interested in security, and I would love more opportunities to work in the security field. I'm noticing this other team is springing up. They have a much more, a closer focus in security. What do you think about, maybe doing an internal transfer? Namra talked about how her boss literally told her, this is what you're looking for and I can't give it to you right now. And that relationship wasn't broken. It was just a boss that was invested in her growth and said, I know you want this and I care about you and I can't give it to you. So consider looking elsewhere. And so it's not as scary as it sounds. People can take it personally, but if you are invest in the relationship, hopefully in most cases you can bring them around to realizing that it's not about them, it's not about them sucking, it's just about you wanting to try a new thing and that new thing being somewhere else.
Yeah, I think the basis of relationships is trust, right? So as long as you are not breaking their trust, like you have been transparent about what you want, and it goes both ways, right? Like the manager needs to be transparent and have that trust, keep that trust on their end as well. So yeah, I think if on both ends, if the parties are not, misguiding each other, then the relationship can still continue. Like the manager I talked about, like I still am in touch with him. So that's proof.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think being in a manager role, I would very much appreciate if any of my direct reports come forward and say, hey, look, I'm actually looking out for something else, and this is the reason why. I would like to have that discussion before any decision is made so that, we can see what can be done. Let's put everything on the table and see how can we, keep you? How can we make whatever is that we offer interesting for you, challenging for you? So I would encourage you to just have a candid conversation.
Yeah, that's true. A good manager is invested in your growth, whether that's on
100%, yes.
100%. Yeah, I mean, when I joined Facebook, we go through a process of team selection. So it's called boot camp. We talk to a lot of different teams and you see what you kind of want to join. And the biggest piece of advice that I got from all of my friends that were already working was to choose your manager well and to make sure that you're aligned with them and that you're comfortable talking to them, because they do play a really big role in your career. And so that was a big point that I kept hearing over and over again, which is your relationship with your manager.
Definitely. Your manager is your biggest advocate. They are your face to the company, both when bad things happen and when good things happen. So when you are looking to advance your career, your manager is the one that people will expect to advocate for you. And when someone has, expectations that are hitting your team, the manager is the one that stands in front of the team and says, no, these expectations don't make sense, right? And so that relationship and having a manager, you investing in that relationship with your manager, and B, feeling like your manager is investing back in that relationship with you is super, super important, I found.
But I would encourage you to actually reach out beyond that, right? Reach out vertically and horizontally within your division so that more people know you and more people can be your sponsors other than your manager, right? So they can advocate for you. They can say, oh, I know this person and I know what they can deliver. I know what they can bring on the table.
That's a super important point.
We have time for one last question. So Shahid was asking, can we ask about promotions and negotiation for promotions and salary, advice on how that works and how to maximize earning?
Yes, and you should.
just do it and be aggressive about it. I think that's something that personally it's taken some growth for me to get to a point to do that. And I think there's also some cultural aspect to it. Like I think in the US people are a lot more vocal about what they want and pushing for what they want. So yeah, I think it's just clearly stating what you want, and also doing the research on what is it that you are worth. Again, like having that network, having that peer network that can be your ally here to make sure you have the right data and the right context. But I think for software engineering jobs in the US, there are so many resources out there. There's levels.fyi, there's I know Blind, everybody's talking about salary all the time. So at least do your research so that you know what you're worth, so you're not like underselling yourself.
Yeah, and a few things that I've done, um, folks are a lot more comfortable now sharing salary, not necessarily as much as in some other countries, but having a group of peers that you are friends with, maybe you know them from school, maybe you got close during work, that you're comfortable sharing your salary with, and they're comfortable sharing their salary with you. That's been hugely helpful for me for a gut check, right? Because the websites will be helpful to a certain extent, but then you can also gut check with folks that you see as your peers and say, what have you been negotiating for? When folks are interviewing around and you know them and they're talking to you about the fact that they're interviewing around, ask them, hey, do you mind, like, would you mind sharing with me, you know, what kind of offers you've been getting, just so you are always collecting that data on what your worth is. In terms of maximizing salary, Forbes came out with an article that said in tech, they suggest you move every 2 years, move companies, or at least negotiate in a big way every 2 years, which is like mind-boggling to me when I read it. But it's such an in-demand field that when you join a company, you'll get a certain rate of salary increase, whether that's on an average year, they'll give you what my dad calls an inflation bump, which is like, yeah, cost of living has raised, here's some money. And then there's the promotion bumps, which are larger. And because of demand in the market, depending on what role you're in, the salary could just be going like this. So if you spend 3-4 years at a company and then you start talking to peers who have switched, you might find that you could be making 30% more somewhere else, which is wild. So keeping an eye out, this is like very specific, but I know that for myself, I'm not very comfortable negotiating. So I have a male friend that I bounce my negotiations off of because he's much more assertive. And so I'll go to him and I'll be like, hey, what would you ask for? And he's like, I would ask for this. And it's always just like way more than I would have asked for. And I'm like, okay, if he says I can ask for this, I can ask for, I like use that to buffer my own courage. I'm like, if he says it and he was willing to say it, I'm willing to say it. And
I would say you take it to the next level and then you say,
You-
can you role play now? You'll be
That's a
my
good
manager.
idea.
Let me see what I can do.
Definitely. Yeah. So those are some of the tricks that I've used to have those conversations. It can definitely be harder with your manager because you have that relationship, and so you'll feel the emotional difficulty there. And they're also starting the conversation earlier can help, right? If you show up around annual compensation review time and you say, I was expecting 10K more, your manager's going to be like, these numbers are locked in and approved by the board. I really can't do anything. If you are starting earlier where you say, hey, you know, and you tie it to your performance, hey, this is, you know, how I've been performing. I've been getting really good feedback. I, you know, have been doing research on the salary for this role, and you know, I'd be curious to hear what you would expect for this promo cycle or this comp review cycle. I would be looking for something like this. Is that reasonable? Like starting that conversation early. I've seen some folks have success with that, and then you'll also find out early if the company's just not going to do that, right? If they say, hey, you know, the budget isn't there this year. If you're really looking for that kind of salary, then like just know that that's not going to happen here. And then you have that information. You can do something with it.
I love that.
One thing I would like to add to the point that, you know, switching companies would give you a bump. My advice would be to be intentional about the point that you are switching at. Like, make sure you feel like you have done enough growth that your current role gives you before you make that jump. And when I say growth, I'm not saying like wait for a promotion. Really, like in terms of what you want to learn, have you squeezed all out of that role in terms of your learning? Many times there would be a case like, and if you stay 6 months more or 1 year more, you might get a promotion. But I think jumping at a point where you feel like the growth is there, whether promotion or not, is in my opinion a better strategy. And I know it can be controversial. Some people might disagree that you should wait for your promotions, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I love all of these points. I've been taking notes. We're a little bit over, and Madiha, I'm gonna go to you. Next time I need to negotiate something, I like need that boost myself. I think it's also kind of a cultural thing, like talking about salary or money and negotiating.
Definitely.
Even I like now I'm still kind of like I can actually talk about how much I make. Is that normal?
Huh.
No.
It's very, very difficult. You are welcome to reach out anytime, and I will just pump you up. I'll be like, ask for more or whatever.
I love that.
It's something that I'm still not amazing at. It's a muscle that I'm continuing to grow, but it's one of the many important muscles, I think, in the working world.
And you can do it over email. I personally find it much easier than doing it over the phone with the recruiter, because then you can even have somebody else type up your email.
Oh, and having multiple offers helps a lot too, because that can help you balance. When I have been job hunting, usually what I do is try to have a salary that you're looking for, which is based off of, because don't base it off of your current salary. Always kind of look at what's market rate for the role that you're looking for and give that kind of range. So that's when the peer feedback becomes really helpful and the friends and the websites becomes really helpful. And then if you're in a position where you have multiple offers, you can use that to help you understand, okay, this is the job that I really want. This is the company that's paying me the most money. I'm going to go to the job that I really want and say, hey, I'm willing to sign. Like I really want to sign. I just am looking for this compensation, and use that as well. Because I feel that when I'm doubting myself, the easiest thing for me to do is to place other concrete things that aren't me in the picture and say, hey, this company that has never really, no investment in me emotionally says this, and this person is saying this. I can use that to kind of counteract my own doubts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're a little over time, but I do want to, before we end, ask each of you if there's any last minute pieces of advice that you want to share, things that you've learned that really stood out to you throughout your career that maybe someone has told you that really influenced you up until this day that you can maybe share with each of us here today.
I mean, I would just say that be open to really opportunities. Take on new challenges, even if you're not sure, whether you're completely ready for it or not, and ask questions and change what you really don't like, right? And don't be afraid of failures. Make learning part of your journey. I think these are some of the things that I would definitely advise.
I think for me, looking back when I started, one thing I was very naive about was like I did not put too much thought into which project I am working on and how does it make me grow. Like it was okay, whatever my manager thinks is the best thing for me to work on, I would just take that. But looking back, when I see other people in my network who did really, really well very quickly, they were very picky about the things that they work on, and they actually like picked the most strategic or most I guess important to the company or to the business projects, and they sort of aligned their personal growth with the growth of the company, for lack of a better word. So you don't have to just like take whatever is given to you. You can be picky, and you should be. And there's the that peer network becomes very important, that you have your peers within the company and in the industry where you're talking about what are the new trends, what are the big technologies, and that are coming up, and you go in that direction.
Big piece of advice is just asking for what you want.
Yeah. A couple things come to mind for me. One, freshman orientation in college, one of the people was like, if you have a question in class and there are 100 people in class, guaranteed at least 2 other people have the same question, so you should ask it anyway. And a lot of people, I think, ignored that. And for some reason, my freshman brain was like, that makes sense. I'm going to ask all the questions. And it's helped. Like, it actually helps. Being the person who shows the engagement by asking questions and kind of initiates, you end up initiating conversations that you wouldn't have otherwise, just by being willing to ask a question and being vulnerable and asking that question. So definitely, as Namra said, basically I'm going to echo what Namra said. One, you know, ask questions, and two, pay attention. This sounds weird, but pay attention to what's being rewarded. It's easy when you join a company, you join a team, especially when you're fresh out of college, to have that like energy, like I'm going to change the world. Everything's going to be amazing. I love where I work. I love, you know, my coworkers. I'm going to help everyone feel happy all the time at work, and it's going to be amazing. And everyone is going to look at you and they're going to say, yes. You know, they're going to say, they'll never say no. They'll always say, you know, bottoms up. We really support bottoms up. Whatever people have the energy to put things into, they should definitely do it. And that's like true for like a year or two. And then after year two, that suddenly stops being true. And what starts being true is, hey, you know, our OKRs are this, and it's expected that folks work on this. And for some people, that ends up being a bit of a surprise. For me, it was a tiny bit of a surprise. And so that's something that I would share with others, is that energy is great, and definitely like maintain that motivation and joie de vivre forever. But also pay attention to, you know, what people say they prioritize and what people actually prioritize isn't necessarily going to be the same thing. So keep an eye on what the company is actually prioritizing. And again, I'm just echoing Namra. If you can align your career growth, if you find that the career growth you want for yourself is aligned with where the company wants to grow, that's when you grow the fastest and you feel the most successful. If those two things are misaligned, then it leads to miscommunication, it leads to confusion. You may not grow as fast as you want. And so, you know, 50% of that might be finding a company where what you want for your career is aligned with what the company wants. And 50% of it might be, you know, knowing what passions you want to put into your job, and then knowing what passions you want to put into your personal life. So maybe in your job, you're really excited about these three things, and the other three things, you know, you volunteer to fill that passion in your life, or, you know, you meet up with friends and do it on a separate time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that advice, especially kind of being new in the industry, being a new grad, joining the company. Saying yes to everything is very true, and I'm realizing I can't keep doing that. It's not sustainable. I literally had this conversation with my manager when he's like, make sure what you're doing is sustainable. So yeah, thank you all so much for all of the advice that you shared, all of like the stories and experiences. I know that there's a lot of comments in the chat. If you go back and read them, people really appreciated it. And I think we'll close with this. Yeah, Jazakallah khairan to everyone. And we have our Facebook group. If anyone that's joining the call right now hasn't joined yet, we can drop a link in the chat, and we'll be having some follow-up panels later for the different areas in tech. We'll do product design next, and then product management, inshallah. So yeah.
Thank you for putting it together, Nada, and the entire Muslim Women in Tech team.
Yeah, this was amazing.
It was really useful for me as well. I learned a few things too.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I know what it really takes to put something like this. So thank you for your hard work.
It's really all of you and everyone that attended, you know, that makes it all of the questions and the conversation. So yeah. Okay. Jazakallah khairan, everyone. Okay.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.